Ooh, to start the live.
It's such a pleasure, by the way. And thank you
there
for,
you are.
I
Okay,
guess,
it works. You did this so much quicker than I would have. Let me. I'm just setting up the camera for YouTube. All right, and
okay,
for
I'm
some
just
reason,
gonna raise
Siri's.
volume here just a little bit.
All right, let's go on over here. I'm almost there.
If I showed you the way that I have my camera mounted, it's on top of a water bottle.
Ah, there we go. That's
Just full of
desperation is
sunglasses back
inspiration. All righty. So, for everyone watching, thanks for joining. And Erica, by the way, are you on YouTube?
I am. I have always been terrible with YouTube. For some reason, TikTok is the only platform where I've blasted off on.
Same here. Same here. Like TikTok doesn't like it's funny. TikTok has taken away my funding and they've censored me, but they've also given me the greatest potential for growth. So YouTube I have like maybe 10,000 followers. Instagram I have like 8,600 and it sounds okay, but like compared to TikTok I'm like what am I doing wrong?
Yeah, TikTok has got, I don't know, they've got the magic sauce, the algorithm. Gosh, I remember, I think my very first video that went viral, a lot of people assumed that due to my videos, I'm very serious. And I'm actually a jokester. I play pranks all the time. And during the pandemic, I was a little bored. And there's this skit out there called the Retro Turbo Encabulator. It's a funny engineering skit. If you ever get a chance to watch it, just pull it up on YouTube. But it's just very complicated engineering jargon.
Oh, okay.
And this was around the whole entire time, like I guess like those doctors, I forgot where they were called, like America First doctors or something, or frontline doctors or whatever. And they were talking during the pandemic. We had this huge divide, and there was that one lady who talked about lizard people and so much. And I kind of did a joke on combining like the Retro Turbo Encabulator with just like all this nonsense jargon.
Okay.
And if you're smart, you would obviously see it was satire. And I was talking about like how it related to COVID and all that stuff, but it was just nonsense. A lot of people, to my shock, actually believed it was real and thought I was a doctor because I was wearing a white coat and I had some like smarty glasses on. And yeah, I got like my first like 3,000 followers.
No way.
Yeah, just being a goofball. But I felt so bad afterwards because there's a lot of people who, English is not their first language. Sure. And I realized, yeah, that probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, Erica. So
no, that's fine. Look, you know what? There's a learning curve until you reach adulthood, and it's up to everyone to be their own critical thinker. That's where I come off as a bit like conservative. So I'm told is like it's your responsibility. You know what I mean? Like it's up to people to be able to interpret some stuff. And but before we kick this off, can you tell us your credentials? Tell us who you are.
Yeah.
How you got into data science? Because she's a data scientist. Pay attention.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Barker. And let's see, I guess I could start off first. My career kind of starts where only child who had a computer and learned how to program back in the 90s.
Wow.
Then I joined the military shortly after 9/11, and I became I say combat journalist because a lot of people relate with movies like Full Metal Jacket.
Okay.
But technically our title in the military, well in the Navy specifically, was Mass Communications Specialist.
All right.
And I pretty much got a lot of my journalistic background in investigation, research, photojournalism. That's the reason why a lot of folks see like photography. Like I took this photo back there in Haiti. That's really nice.
It's a nice setup you got there.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm in Miami.
Beautiful. I was just there.
So after that, I decided to go back to school, got my master's degree in business. Then I was teaching journalism for a while to students. And then I moved up to New York and I worked for like the NFL, Condé Nast, and then eventually I found myself in the world of private equity.
Yeah.
And specifically in private equity, I worked more as along the lines of marketing and creative direction, working with a lot of like analytical data
Yeah.
And just as a hobby, I have a friend who is really smart in finance. He showed me the Bloomberg terminal. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I have a time block on my social media apps, and it just gave me a 5-minute warning. If I disappear, you'll know I'll come right back if for some reason I end. But let me.
The Bloomberg terminal, though, the Bloomberg terminal. So what I like, one of my degrees is in economics. So getting onto that was fun.
Yeah, and I did not realize those things are $24,000 a year.
Yes.
I was like, during the pandemic, our offices closed, and I was like, oh gosh, like let me see if I can get myself my own like if there's an online version of the Bloomberg terminal. And nope, absolutely not. You need to pay $24,000 a year, or have access to a university, or have some friends who have access to it, who are not afraid to let you in the building. So I was like, I can probably start doing a lot of this in Python using APIs.
Wow.
And that was really how I kind of my journey evolved from journalist to marketing and creative direction to dealing with data to eventually getting more into like a economic data science type of role. And it's all just driven by insane curiosity and like the reason why things are, instead of taking things at face value, which I love your video on being a free thinker.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, seeing between the lines of data to really make your decision. I wish more people would do that. And that's one of my motivations, especially with my podcast, is to kind of get people to start thinking more as free thinkers, not so much as like, well, look what the other side did, but to look more at the data and anticipate where we're going with that data based on sound, good thinking decisions.
What's interesting? I was talking about this yesterday on my live. It's like someone was asking, well, how come, like, why don't people just look, like, why don't people try to see beyond the veneer? Like, why don't they actually just try to think for themselves? And there are a lot of reasons, but I think one of them is that this is such an anxious society, and people are already so over anxious. Even though we've never really had it this good in the history of civilization, we've actually never had such a good quality of life, but we are so anxious. We are so overwhelmed with so many things, with maybe expectations we're not meeting, or not being able to pay the rent, not being able to, or maybe your kid's sick, or all these other things that are happening, relationship failures, who knows? And that just hearing like what's actually happening, or how the system is kind of screwing you or tricking you, it's just another addition to the anxiety. And maybe like looking into it, like trying to verify data on your own, that just might be too overwhelming for these people. And it's just another thing to do on the list of things that they haven't done and are nowhere near close to doing. And it's no excuse, but I just think that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah, it's, also the problem is repetition. And, and look, I'm a hypocrite. I'm somebody who sometimes, I fall into that trap, and, you keep hearing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, that eventually sets an impression on you, and you start to believe that's true. But, in hindsight, like flipping the coin, this is also something you can do, especially in therapy, to help build confidence in yourself, help to believe in yourself. You just keep saying that same thing over. But if we're looking at the news, for instance, the talking heads, who, their whole entire job is to keep you glued to the television or keep you glued here on TikTok, because that creates revenue, that creates their livelihood.
Exactly.
They're going to be focusing on those outliers most, the points that are far outside of from the mean of whatever it is. And they're going to have you focus on that and make you believe, or make all of us believe, that is that one little tiny lone dot way outside, that outlier, is going to cause such a massive disruption in your life, rather than having you focus pretty much on what is, I'm sorry, I'm talking data science here, but like pretty much the
So, guys, don't worry. She is on a time lock on her phone. So her phone. There you go. That was the time lock, right? Hold on. Wait. Let's. Yeah, it's the time lock on her phone. Oopsie daisy. Hello, hi IQ. Hello, everyone joining. Okay. Can't hear you. Sure, sure, sure. Let's see. Hello, everyone. Hi. Yeah, everyone on YouTube, how you doing? Yeah, I'm just waiting for Erica Barker to log back on. Here, let me just get the invite. There we go. All right, let's just go back here. Erica, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I am so sorry about that. I put a time limit on how much I can use social media apps, so I can be a free thinker.
But no, that's actually that's a good deal of discipline.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
try.
don't worry about it. Don't worry at all. It's like this isn't anything like super official, you know. So well, I think it's so cool. So you started making your own data science algorithms using Python, right?
Well, actually, no. Believe it or not, I have been programming in Python for a long time, but it was typically to automate something that
Yeah.
because I'm a lazy person. If I can find a way to automate it, I'll do it, and that's how I
Most
get started
people
with Python.
usually are lazy.
With specifically to economics, and I do want to put a warning out there to your audience. I am not an economist. I do not have a degree in economics. It's just I'm more on the data science end. So where I got my start really was there were certain indicators I wanted to create for TradingView. And
Nice.
they have there's something on there called PineScript where you can make your own indicators to have your own specific analysis.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. I mean, it's very powerful, and you can look at time series analysis of basic assets, but it's very limited. And then eventually, because of TradingView's limits, I decided to get back into doing it more with Python. And you have a lot more flexibility. I mean,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's like having a Ferrari versus a micro machine.
Can I add, like, I have a master's in science in like data science, and
Holy
yeah,
cow!
yeah, I got it like 7 8 years ago. I mean, I'm so rusty on it, but like I loved building models with Python.
Oh,
I
okay.
had so much fun, and it was great because in the beginning I would write like, let's say, hundreds of lines of code to get like certain outputs, and then like as I got better, I was like, oh, I only need like 10. And it was so fun to build that. And I remember one thing, and I always talk about this like a broken record whenever I talk about Python, is I used Python to see which book was more positive, the Quran or the Bible. And and this was before I was a social media guy. I was just like, let's just see. So I made like a dictionary of like positive words like love, forgiveness, acceptance, and I did it how many instances per 1,000 words, and the Quran one had much more words of like
Oh my
mercy.
gosh!
And then when I went to like violent words, like a dictionary of negative words, the Bible had so many more like harshness, like a lot more judgy things. And I couldn't believe it. It was, and I kept working on the algorithm, and it just kept finding more and more nasty things in the Bible. I'm like, oh, okay. And the funny thing is, the Quran mentions the Virgin Mary more than the Bible. That is,
Wow.
it didn't call her the Virgin Mary; it was Mary. But and the thing is, I wrote that on an old laptop, and I couldn't find that laptop anywhere, so I'm probably gonna have to start from scratch. But I haven't coded in so long, and like if you don't use it, you lose it. But another thing is, I like my projects were based on finding if having some form of paid family leave was good for the economy, and it was. Like all of the models I made said that having paid family leave would actually be good for the overall economy and the local economy. And I even showed that there were a lot of positive correlations with like employment and GDP growth with the implementation of the Family Leave Act under the Clinton administration. You know?
Well, I mean, I think that makes sense because families equals more consumption. That equals more dollars going back into the real economy, and that also it's something we talked about the velocity of money.
Oh, that was such a good article. I really liked it.
By the way, I do need to apologize to your audience that I haven't corrected this yet on my site, but there was there was a metric on there called the real median household income, and as somebody who was much smarter than me, who actually works with Fred data, noticed that I accidentally pulled the real instead of the relative. And they, if you didn't know what you were doing, if you did not work with Fred data often, this was a very easy mistake to have. But it showed that the real median household income percentage was dropping significantly more. But what happened was I was double dipping on counting the factor of inflation over the last 40 years. So I apologize about that. But the velocity of money, though, is still a very scary metric.
But also, you're still right. Like, it's true, maybe the relative middle class income hasn't dropped, but it's barely risen in comparison to the average CEO compensation.
Right.
It's not like everything's hunky dory. It's the CEO compensation has grown like 70 or 80 times more than middle class income.
Right. And, and there's a bunch of nuance here that we really can't account for. So, I have not done any hard research into this, but my theory is that in the 90s, when you're looking at real medium households, those were more families.
Yeah.
Okay. As opposed to now, we have people are, I guess, due to social media, they're more isolated. So a lot of these households are actually individuals just by themselves. So how do we account for that? If you're talking about a medium household today, where it's just one individual versus a medium household in the 90s, where it was two working individuals, how do we account for that as well? So there's a lot of questions, and I'm not sure if it's going to be possible with the technology we have right now, because there's just so many variables, there's so much data that we can't account for to really get a good idea on what exactly is going on. We can get a picture maybe, and that was what I was trying to do with the real median household income percentage index. But, even that, you really don't know. But I believe the velocity of money, though, is a very good metric to get a pretty good idea.
And you're absolutely right. It dropped. And the funny thing is, like when the government actually was printing money, and like they dropped interest rates, and there was so much money that just got released into the economy, you would have expected to see a huge skyrocketing in the velocity of money. But no, the money got parked because it got parked to the top 1% and the corporations, because they put it in offshore accounts, or they invested it in stocks or bonds, but they parked that money. Or they just put it into money market accounts, and it didn't circulate. Like if that money went into the middle class, I think we would have seen a huge jump in the velocity of money.
Did you, by any chance, read this book? I think it came out not too long ago. It's called Lords of, I think, Easy Money. And it talks about pretty much the sin of what we did with quantitative easing. And it all started with Alan Greenspan during the Bush administration. And essentially, quantitative easing, it was invented in Japan, and it was a means to get us out of the Great Recession. And it actually worked really well. Mm-hmm. The problem was when Ben Bernanke took the realms, he wanted to stimulate the economy even more. And there was this one lone person, I believe his name was Tom Hoenig. He was like, no, we got to be careful with this. But eventually, the government started relying a little bit too much on quantitative easing, to the point to where it created the hole that we had to keep quantitative easing more and more and more and more to get us out of that hole. And now it looks like indefinitely we're going to have to continue doing quantitative easing to make up for over quantitative easing in the past. And this all started really with Ben Bernanke under the mentorship of Alan Greenspan. It's a really interesting read. But with quantitative easing, in case you guys don't know, it's basically where the government goes into a computer and they just create money out of thin air. And they pretty much send it, excuse me, I hope I'm saying this correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gio. They pretty much distributed it to all the major banks like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, in exchange for government bonds. Yeah. And it's meant to pretty much push, push the market. But, looking today between the real economy, which is, just not the stock market, but how much money exchanges hands between you and the restaurant downstairs or so on and so forth. And the actual stock market, it's making the stock market metrics look wonderful. It looks great, but what's going on with the real economy? Because I don't think quantitative easing is much help there.
No. Well, even in 2008, 2009, even 2010, all this money got released to the banks and the banks were still not lending. Right. It took them a while. So they got this free money that they were supposed to circulate into the economy and they weren't lending. People who had like 750 credit scores had savings, had income. They were not getting loans. And it took a long time before the banks started like putting out money freely. Or not a little bit more freely. And I feel like that really delayed our recovery. And it's almost like maybe the banks just wanted to get more quantitative easing before they actually started releasing the money. Like I got to read up more on that, but it was crazy. And I want to mention again how you said we started this quantitative easing and now it looks like we have to keep doing this quantitative easing to get us out of the mistakes we made from previous quantitative easing. That just sounds like a self-destructive path.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, so the people on top get all of this extra money, so they buy assets, so they get to see their market cap values and their net worth increase as the money supply keeps increasing, but the average American loses their purchasing power.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I remember in the 90s, the stock market, the S&P 500.
You weren't around in the 90s.
Oh, come on.
You were like 5 or something.
Well, I mean, I can look at the data, and I do remember, because my economics class in high school, the real economy and the S&P 500, they were pretty much in line with each other. They both both strongly correlated what was going on with each other. But around the time quantitative easing really started to take hold, that's when you kind of start to see this separation between the stock market economy and the real economy.
Yeah. And it's only gotten worse. I'm not trying to be negative or anything, but it's like
no.
But what's interesting is, and I mention this as often as I can, and I forget the guy who said it, but he said pretty much this election was a battle between the corporatists and the oligarchs. And the oligarchs won.
It's, I'm actually thinking about doing an episode on this, and I'm still doing my research, but it's so interesting because it's also seems to be a battle between pragmatism and idealism. Idealism is pretty much, what Europe stands on. Pragmatism are folks like, I guess, if you want to talk about Peter Thiel, who are like, do whatever it takes to expedite, get around the red tape, and make us competitive. That's a pragmatic. And by all means, I do understand certain positions, bureaucratic bloats, sure. A lot of red tape. It can make competing and maintaining our superpower status in the world very difficult.
Yeah, it really can.
Yeah, but it's such a weird shift that's happening right now between you're looking at this division happening between all types of political ideologies, and some are gravitating more toward a pragmatic approach. Others are gravitating more toward idealistic approach.
But so let's think. I mean, I can't speak too much about certain politicians, but I feel like the current administration, along with the guy who owns Tesla, I mean, I think they're preaching they're preaching pragmatism, but it's a crazy idealism. It's like, oh, trickle down economics works. Oh, people who have zero to no actual family values and have had several failed marriages and illegitimate children. No, we are upholding the ideals of Christianity. It's like I feel like I feel like the idealists who build castles in the sky are in office, and I feel like the pragmatists, I feel like the corporatists were a bit more pragmatic because they were like, all right, so we're gonna hoard wealth and do all that, but let's at least have roads and let's have some kind of social safety nets out there. And I feel like with the oligarchs, they're like, we don't need those. We're just going to make things work because we know what best to do with money. And I don't like the oligarchs. See, the thing is, I hate the corporatists. I'm not a fan of the oligarchs. And it's like, how come it's just those two?
Right. Well, I'm not sure if you guys have read Alex Karp's new book. It's called The Technological Republic. Alex Karp is the CEO of, oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm having the brain fart. Palantir, sorry. And it's a really interesting read on the reason why a lot of these Silicon Valley oligarchs are having a sudden shift, and they're pulling a lot of the political strings right now. But
yeah,
I'm trying to approach this from a nuanced position because I do understand. I worked in the government. I was in the military. I do understand the difficulty of working with the military, and sometimes just like trying to get from point A to point B, which is simple for everybody else, can become a real chore, like you're running a marathon. And that's something that they experience on the front lines. And I do understand that, we call it bureaucratic bloat and too much red tape. But it's also pretty scary because they believe that we should be running government like a Silicon Valley startup where it's move fast, break things, and fix it later. Because they believe in a system where, it's just like, well, let's try to break it, because if it breaks, then we can replace it with a better system, or we can come in and improve it, or whatever. If it doesn't break, then that means it was meant to stand the test of time.
But if it breaks here, people could die. If it
right,
breaks,
and they
entire sectors can collapse and destroy like a lot of local economies, and that takes a long time to fix.
Right, and that's the reason why we have to have a good balance between idealistic and pragmatic thinking.
I want to ask you a question. I'm sorry. Someone's been like this guy Felix Kessler. He's asking on YouTube because I'm only going to be responding to questions on YouTube because I'm trying to get YouTube more YouTube activity. So Felix Kessler says, how is the perspective from a data scientist of what social media impacting opinion is doing instead of the actual data?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. That is a really good question. I believe data scientists who work specifically in this field should be very careful, especially in marketing, about relying too much on what the data is saying. You really need to have a good understanding of psychology as well. And there's this old tale, where storytelling is the greatest invention that humans have ever created. Because, there's fire, there's a wheel, but it was storytelling that taught us how to survive. Before there was words, before there was written language, there was pictures on the cave wall.
Yeah.
The next generation how to survive, and we were able to progress from that. And we would tell over this time before there was written language, we would tell, there were things about the world we did not understand. Now, keep in mind, we're going to come back to this. We did not understand. They were mysteries. And humans, we typically like to make things black and white, put things in categories rather than looking at nuance, the shades of gray. especially when it comes to things we do not understand. It's scary to see new things that we don't understand. And sometimes when we're isolated, we begin to build upon these previous stories and add our own flair to it, maybe making it more scary and telling it over and over. So we're not only telling it over and over, we're not only hearing it over and over, we're telling it over and over and over. And this embeds itself into the plasticity of our brains and can take something that's an exaggeration, maybe superstition, and turn it into indisputable facts in your brain that cannot be contested by any form of logic or common sense. Yes. And that is the power of repetition, especially when it's being delivered to you in the form of a very good storyteller.
That's a very good point. You know, I had some questions I wanted to ask earlier because in one of our discussions, we were talking about how certain countries, like the one that begins with the letter C, they fudge data, you know.
Yes.
And it's like it's actually hard to make decisions based off of these countries' official data because we don't know if it's actually real. So can you talk about that?
Sure. This is a great example how I got burned. I think we'll talk with I don't know if you want to mention the country, but I guess like they can, our audience can put together the picture. Sure. There's this company called Luckin Coffee, and the country that begins with C. And they had amazing book value. They had great fundamentals. And I was like, oh, hey, you know what? As an American, I'm going to invest in this because this looks like this could be the next Starbucks. I mean, these numbers are just amazing. This book value is incredible. And it turns out that that stock was around, I think, $12 when I got into it, and it dropped down to pretty much like less than 50 cents overnight because they discovered that the CFO, and it wasn't that country, it was an American country that started looking, it was an American company and analysts that started looking into it because they believed the numbers were too good to be true. They discovered that the CFO was drastically lying about those measures. And, as we look more closer into that economy, this is a norm that happens specifically over there. And there's several ways that they can do it. They don't have to straight out lie and fudge the numbers. You can have small exaggerations, which we do here in America as well. Yes. But there's another thing where there's just so much data, and there's just this data is categorized in such a nonsensical manner where it's chaotic, and it just makes it incredibly difficult to make any sense of it, that you can make the data say anything you really want.
Can I add? Because yes, I remember, and I'll just say the country's name once. Hopefully, I don't get that. But it was China. Like last year, they had such bad youth unemployment numbers. It went past 20%. It ended up going past like near all-time highs. That China just stopped reporting on the data for like 6 months, and then re-released the data in June, and of 2024. And they said, "Oh, look, the unemployment actually dropped by a few percentage points." And all they really did was just figure out a new way to calculate that. And at the same time that this was going on, we were seeing record amounts of Chinese encounters at the Mexican border.
Right. What's really interesting about that, let's just say the country, and whatever the administration, the regime is, they discover, oh, it looks like we made a mistake. This is completely inaccurate, but we've been saying this for so long. Yep. Well, as a country, it makes you apparently psychologically look weak, and that's, you're not dependable, and it gives such a bad perception to the public, the geopolitical community, I guess, around the world, that you kind of just double down. And it's this doubling down nonsense, especially when it comes to metrics and data, to where you just don't apologize. That can be that can be so incredibly dangerous. It's not that it can be; it is incredibly dangerous. And it's
to me, it just makes it look like more of a closed economy. And I feel like the more closed an economy is, the less it's going to be good for trade, and then it's going to be bad for everybody else. Now, you mentioned to me about like a week ago that there were federal employees who were pretty much like keeping the data or keeping track of data and they're out of a job. Like, do you remember that? Like,
Yeah. I think I
can you tell me about
texted you
it?
that like a late, and yeah. Apparently, there is a group. There's a group. I forgot the name of the office, but there's a group. They basically are tasked with grabbing metrics and data on how well the economy is, on how well our economy is doing.
Huh?
So you have to ask. It's like, look, I'm a lone data scientist. I make mistakes all the time. Sometimes, and the greatest thing that I have as a data scientist is when other folks happen to catch a mistake that I put out there and made. But if you're talking about just getting rid of these folks and replacing them with some type of AI system, like how many people are going to manage this AI system?
Yes.
How many people are going to be able to put this AI system and check and make sure that it's not skewing the data, it's not making a mistake, it's not creating this cascade effect where one mistake results into two mistakes, that those two mistakes result into five mistakes, and it just becomes exponential. It becomes exponentially flawed the longer the system is running. And it's also, how can we make good, sound decisions during this transition period, especially if you're working in economics, when you no longer when you're relying on data was from a team of people who are trustworthy, who are professionals, and they're no longer there anymore. It's like, that makes me also worried about what's going to happen to our economy, because a lot of institutions make their decisions based off of these metrics from the Federal Reserve and from understanding, trying to put together a picture and trying to create a trajectory on what's going to happen. And if you don't have that, how can you make good, sound decisions with billions of dollars?
Yeah. Trillions even, really.
Trillions, yes.
It's and the thing is, like, I mean, AI is incredible. I mean, I use AI frequently, but I think that there's the hype behind it, and even what Elon Musk is saying, we're actually not at the level of sophistication required to put such sensitive information in the hands of just AI. I mean, like, because I think, like, and someone just said this, Murd just said that, if because like, if AI gets something wrong once, then you're going to need something that can verify what the AI says. And what's that going to be? People.
Right.
Why not just keep the people there?
Yeah. So hallucinations and AI is a problem. It's getting better, though. It is getting better.
Hallucinations?
Yeah. So that's basically where you say, you type into ChatGPT or whatever, hey, what's 2 + 2? And it says 5. And it's like, that doesn't sound right. Are you sure? I'm absolutely 100% sure of that, because it was reading some satire. It was reading some satire piece from Reddit. Actually, this, believe it or not, did not happen to ChatGPT. It happened to Gemini.
Okay.
Because Gemini's data was looking at Reddit, and on Reddit, if you know anything about it, there is a ton of satire and sarcasm and people just making up stuff. So when that's your data source, you're probably going to hallucinate quite a bit.
Oh, that's such a cool term, hallucination.
Yeah. So what I have personally done, because I use, LLMs are great for doing research and just expediting things very quickly.
What are LLMs?
Oh, large language models. That's what, like,
LLMs.
Gemini, Claude. So what I've done was I've taken ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, and I have their APIs, and I basically have built a Python script where I ask it a question, and the three of those LLMs will debate each other. One also acts as a moderator as well. I use Gemini because I don't have to pay much for using the API. So it's actually, you're using different systems with different libraries that are programmed much differently, all to debate each other, and if they all come to 100% consensus on something, then you've got a higher probability of having a very accurate answer.
Wow, that's so cool. Is it on your phone, or is it on your laptop? Like, what are you?
It's on my laptop.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I need to actually put it in the cloud. I need to build some AWS system for it, but no, it's still on my laptop.
When I look at ChatGPT, but I don't trust it just because in the very beginning I saw like ChatGPT would just make up data sometimes. Like if I wanted to look into like the Chinese money supply, it would give me data that was so skewed and it was so off, it wasn't anything I could Google. And so what I do with AI is like if, with ChatGPT at least, if I need to chart data very quickly, or I want to find a bunch of articles about a subject, I feel like it's better than Google because it's a bit more fine with the sources. But the answers it gives, I'm skeptical. I have to double check and triple check and quadruple check. You were going to say something?
Gemini is probably it's the worst. It's like when you can type in something in Gemini and it's like it'll forget like what it just talked about before. It's like it has no memory. Whereas on ChatGPT or Claude, you could just keep on going forever, and it'll keep on looking at everything you've typed in that session. Now, there's something else that's really interesting that's going on is there are a lot of we all know about doomsday preppers. And then we also know about like privacy hawks, like people your friends who are like so incredibly paranoid about privacy, and justly so, that they're using like the light phone. They don't use smartphones or anything like that. Everything's through Telegram, no social media. Well, we're seeing like other folks who are doomsday prepping for data, and they're using their own LLMs. And I think that's really kind of cool too, because you can take a little bit of panic and chaos and like create a really good efficient system from this. And what I mean by this is if you go to huggingface.co, you can actually go and grab all these different open source LLMs.
Okay.
Actually run them yourself and have your own personal LLM with your own knowledge base. Just in case the world ends, you have your own survival guide.
Wow.
Or let's just say like you're running human resources in your company, and you want to just make it easy to ask human resource questions. Well, you build your own LLM with one of these open source models. You plug in all of your manuals, your human resource documentation.
Yeah.
And there you go. You have somebody who can answer any human resource question there on the fly.
I want to ask a question.
Yeah, sure thing.
Do you think that and this is from, again, Felix Kessler. Do you think that working with data makes you a little bit insensitive as a person? You're sure that working in the stock market, this person says that they're sure that working in the stock market made them see the world differently. Oh, and he says he already lost faith in humanity. So, okay. A little negative. So, do you think working with data makes you insensitive?
It really just depends on who you are as a person.
I
for me, I guess, if it's not obvious, I'm a trans woman. And, it's, I find myself, especially living here in Florida, there's a lot of people who just say things who are very incorrect. It's astounding. And I try to keep that in the back of my mind, just who are we as humans? And I do see people who are, they do look at data, and that's it. You cannot argue with the data. The data is sound. And the problem with data is all we know so far. It's all we've collected, but there's so much nuance. There's probably an infinite amount of, well, there's not infinite, but there's close to an infinite amount of nuance between every single data point, no matter how close they are together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we have to keep that in mind. And just if we had every single data point, we would know the future. There would be no such thing as chaos. We would be able to make sense of anything. And the problem with us as humans is we're so egotistical. Every single one of us, myself included, where we do try to categorize everything. We believe we know what's happening, and it's just we don't. We really don't, because we are so limited with our mental capacity. And even with our technology, it looks great with quantum computing, these supercomputing centers. But even with those tools, there's still so much we don't know, because nuance is almost infinite. It's like fractal time.
Did you see that movie Don't Look Up?
Yes, I did.
So remember, like the guy, I guess the guy who's the equivalent of Elon Musk, he says to the scientist, he says, we have 5 million data points on you, and we know all these things. And he just said all these specifics about his life, and he said, And we are sure with like a certain, like what, like 95 or 99% certainty that you are going to die alone. And that didn't happen. You know,
Right.
he actually died surrounded by loved ones, you know, with at some kind of peace. And to me, that just showed it's like, yeah, you can have all the data points that you need, but there's always a nuance. There's always something that the best AI, that the best computers can't predict, because humans, even though we do have some logical processing, we're still chaotic. We're still irrational.
Yeah, I mean, most of our history has been thinking with the animal brain, not the logical brain. Your frontal lobes, and it's still a very much important part of how we choose our politics, how we make economic decisions,
Yeah.
who we fall in love with. So it's not saying it's bad, but I'm just saying that it's a very big part of our life. And I think the more we understand that and our story of who we are as humans and why we are, the better we can make sense of the world rather than what the talking head on television is telling us. And the better we can make sense of data.
I have zero trust in the talking heads.
Well, I mean, it's the thing with politics is I kind of look at them like a magician. They have to use a sleight of hand to distract you with this. Usually it's a social issue while they're, doing this back here. And, they discovered it's great for passing legislation and winning votes. And, it started off like a little modest, and then it got a little bit more as the next generation. And the problem with doing this theatrics, these political theatrics, is you're setting up the stage for the next generation of politicians who come in.
Yep.
You're no longer going to understand that this is theatrics. They're going to understand this as indisputable truths because a person in a noble high position of being a politician, a congressman, was saying it over and over and over, not knowing that this was theatrics, and they believe it. And then they're going to build upon that, and it's going to become a case of scapegoating, and it's going to start building divide, and it's also going to give our enemies overseas some wiggle room on how to split us up even more.
I think that's already happened. I mean, I think what's been going on now is like, this, I think we've been going through this like very deep conservative push to reset the clock since the Reagan administration. And I think it's like clockwork, but I think that even Newt Gingrich, who I think really helped propel us into being like a mentally lesser society, I think even he would be like, oh my God, what have I done? Because they kept setting the stage for this. And they didn't think of the consequences of these actions on what it would do to our actual culture.
Right.
And now, I mean, and just imagine any politician 20 years ago saying that we stand with Russia.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy. And the scary thing about it is we're now in an age where no sane person who is incredibly intelligent and would be amazing at unifying their base and really getting stuff done. Nobody wants to run for the office because it's a threat not only to their livelihood but to their family. Like, who wants to have a brick thrown through your window?
Yep.
And that's on both sides. It's it's crazy. And
both sides hate. Both sides are full of like hate and derision and judgment. But I wanna mention something. So I think that the GOP after 2020 realized that they were on the outs, that the party was incredibly weak, and they just pushed the identity politics card, and they started persecuting like the trans community, and they really targeted on them and blew up the issue of, oh, I don't want a male changing in front of my daughter and blah, 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 all that stuff. And they really just did that because that was the only button they had to push, and they pushed it hard. And it sadly worked. But I think that they are going after 501c3 because that is one of the bits of legislation that gives that trans people are protected by, but it's also the main source of protection for the disabled community. There are about 40 million people who get like protections from 501c3. They get financial, some of them get stipends, or they get to have a job, they get to be in school, they get, like IEPs, they get so much protection from this. And I think that's something that the GOP has been trying to work against for a very long time. And they just used the trans community as a target to focus all of this energy to. And you have so many clueless parents who are just thinking that that their daughters are going to be somehow, assaulted by, a trans person, and they're like, well, I'm willing to take apart anything else as long as it gets rid of this chance of that happening to my kid. And I know a lot of trans people. They want to mind their business.
Exactly.
There's no, if a trans person is using a bathroom, the only thing they want more than anything is to be left the heck alone so they could finish their business.
Yeah, when I walk into it, I take the turnpike. I was born and raised here in Florida.
In Florida, okay.
1982. And, going up and down the turnpike.
You were born in 1982?
Yeah, I was.
What? I seriously thought you were like born maybe like 1990. That's why I was like, you weren't around in the 90s.
No, I was born in 82, and I watched Florida, like Lawton Childs was a Democratic governor here when I was a kid. It was just a state that looked at politics like, oh, I like this guy, he makes sense, and it wasn't like this red versus blue thing.
Yeah.
And I remember just riding. It was a very country town. Riding my bike through orange orchards, and it was everybody liked each other. When I transitioned in 2009 here, after I got out of the military, everybody was like, "Wow, that's really cool. I'm so glad you got to live your life." It wasn't politicized back then. It's like this amazing how far science has come, and people were more open. They were reading the research, trying to understand. And there's a ton of research in the reason why folks are trans. This is something I've always felt since I've been 4 years old. Now, ironically, I don't fit the stereotype that most people assume when it comes to trans. Like, I'm a military veteran, a combat veteran. I'm somebody who does not wear dresses. I wear pants all the time and blazers, and I never wear a purse. I don't like wearing jewelry or anything like that. I'm more into intellectual things. And when I go into the bathroom on the turnpike somewhere, I'm constantly nervous. I'm like looking around. I'm trying to find a hole where there's no people because I'm worried that one person is going to yell and scream at me. It's just because that did happen to me one time when I was helping my parents build a pool pump. There was this woman in Home Depot who insisted on following me and just saying, "That's a man, that's a man, that's a man."
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's just it's like if you knew what my story was, I had to bury Bobby McCrill, my mentor in Iraq. I came home to find my friend who served in Iraq. We shared a house. He committed suicide. It's like I have a bunch of trauma, and I tried to do my best. I believe in this country. I serve this country. It's just you have no idea about who I am as a person.
Yep.
You have no idea the reason why I don't post too many TikToks is because that's all the hate. I just did a Super Bowl thing for Verizon.
Yeah.
People were calling me DEI trash, and it's just do you know anything about the story of who makes Erica? And it's not just me. There's many trans folks who are like that. And at the same time, you have that aggression on the right, and on the left, I've had the same issue where people are like, "Oh, you're trans, you're a hero." No, I'm not.
I'm a human being.
I'm not a hero because I'm trans.
Yeah.
Say I'm a hero because I served in the military, but this is just a vessel. Yeah. Trying to understand the compassion and love of who makes me, my actions, what I do. That's what makes me. That's why you should like me or hate me. It's based on my actions, not this vessel that I'm living in on my time here on Earth.
Our society preaches to judge people by actions and not words, or by the vessel. But if you actually look at the actions that have been taken by a lot of our leaders, then they would be judged poorly. Then they are judged as failures. I mean, it's disheartening. It's disheartening to see people in such high positions of power that don't demonstrate just proper qualifications or don't even seem to have a basic wherewithal. They just knew how to be the loudest sycophant.
It's it's the days of being stoic and having good decorum and respect. You have to look at Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell, like their relationship.
Okay.
And say what you want about either of them, but it was admirable. It's admirable.
Yeah.
How the two of them were friends and they would go and fish, and so it's like, whatever happened to that? Because we should all be friends. And
but like the thing is, it's the facts have become politicized.
yeah,
And it's just, and when you can't even agree on facts, how do you reconcile that? And I see this, and you know what I've noticed? I've noticed very frequently that the last time I heard it was a week ago, but this was even happening for the past few years. I knew a lot of dudes who were into stoicism and they were very into self-improvement. And then once, MAGA started getting again, they abandoned stoicism for extreme Christianity. And it's like, that how on earth do you do that? If you are a stoic, then you accept things as they are objectively, and you don't trust to faith for, if you're electing a politician or if you make any decision, you don't make a decision based on faith as a stoic. But every justification I have heard for this current administration is it's faith. It's faith.
Well, what faith is it?
It's not just Christianity. No, like it's not
Witness.
like they're saying. I hear a lot. Well, Trump is hurting the economy now, but I think he's going to make it better, or like that kind of stuff. Like, Trump's tariffs are really going to hurt manufacturing, but I think it's gonna be better in like a year or two because he said so. Even though there is no fact, there's not been one instance where blanket tariffs have been easily remedied within a year. Like if blanket tariffs are meant to like reshore, it takes several years to reshore jobs.
Right. And
one thing with Pete Hegseth. I'm sorry. With Pete Hegseth, he's an idiot. He's an idiot, and he was a major in the Army. I don't think he has comparable leadership experience to other secretaries of defense. And people are like, there's a military veteran on this app. He's like, well, since things aren't as tense as they could be, he has wiggle room or he has a learning curve. And I'm like, you don't put someone as a Secretary of Defense in the hopes that they'll rise to the occasion. That's faith. And I'm sorry, you don't trust to faith in something that has to be objective. And when you're choosing military leadership, you have to be quite objective, even ruthless and cunning.
It reminds me of the gambler who goes into a casino with their life savings.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like, and who's very faithful.
Yeah. Or why not just, why not just hand your kids off to the first babysitter you come across? Just, it's like there's what you want to happen, and there's things we tell ourselves to make ourselves think that what we want to happen is likely, but that's really, it's selfish, and I think it's very childish. And it's so frustrating that this happens to even very intelligent people I know. I know some very successful, intelligent people who are on the Trump train because of faith. And when you bring any facts, they go, well, yeah, I really don't like that. Oh, I hate that about Trump, or I hate this, or one thing I hear all the time, well, Trump isn't perfect. And I'm like, if you're going to say Trump isn't perfect, neither was Kamala. So why didn't you vote for her?
Or it's you get the whataboutisms.
Yeah. Well, what is a whataboutism? Can you describe what a whataboutism is? I don't really.
I guess if you're looking at debates, like there's a reason why we have very good debate rules. In prestigious universities about like straw man arguments and so on and so forth. But whataboutisms is like, instead you ask me a question that is meant to get me to critically think about my position, but instead of me doing that, I actually fire back at you with a whataboutism. Well, what about Hillary's emails? What about?
All the time. Yes, exactly. What about? My thing is answer my question first, and I'll answer yours.
Right.
That's just what I do.
And then the next tactic, if whataboutism does not work, you take all the favorable data from different periods of time that's not around that, and you push that, and then you go in the attack mode. And it's just like debating is just such a joke nowadays. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't answer any questions whatsoever.
Well, look at the presidential debates. I mean, look at the presidential debates. That's an example that is set. I think most Americans, when they think of debate, they either see something in a show or they think of the presidential debates. And if you compare any of Trump's debates, you know, to, let's say, the Obama-Romney debate, the Obama-McCain debate, or, you know, George Bush and what was that loser's name? You know,
John Kerry.
Kerry. You know, those were actual debates. They followed the rules of debate, and even though there was some whataboutisms and some jibes, but there was a decorum, and there was some kind of genuine pursuit for truth. And what's it descended to now? You know.
Right. Well, here's a really interesting statistic for you. When Nixon was debating John F. Kennedy, everybody who watched, most of the people who watched the debate on television said Kennedy won. But most of the people who listened to the debate over radio said Nixon won. Wow. So again, we're back into psychological nuance of how we make our decisions. It's just that based on how you look, how you present yourself, how you move your hands when you're speaking. Typically, hand movements are very hypnotic. If you think about it, typically very good speakers, they understand the art of good hands. Somebody who's doing the steepling of the hands, and they don't move, they look very questionable. It makes you suspicious because they're not moving. Whereas you could see somebody who's moving their hands is very passionate, and that comes across to the audience as authentic, trustworthy.
Sorry, I just got a live will end thing. Okay, there you go. There it is. So TikTok just telling me that we've been on for an hour, but that's fine. A few more minutes. And then I got but you know, I think what Trump succeeded in is if you watch a debate with Trump, and if the volume isn't on, you'll say he won because he appears stronger, more confident, and dismissive of the opponent. And it doesn't matter like if it seems disrespectful or anything, it was effective because a lot of people who already like Trump said they just said that he won because he seemed more confident. And if you would just listen to the debate, I think you would be like, oh yeah, he clearly lost. I mean, what kind of a debater says they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets? The thing is, I don't understand how any, and I don't want this to be like a bashing our president, discussion, because I could do that for hours. But how does any intelligent person with any self-esteem or confidence in their own opinions say that that person wins a debate and that person has the aptitude to handle the weight of the most powerful seat in America, in the world?
It's a very limbic system, animal brain type of thinking. I mean, the first thing I noticed when I was a kid, and I noticed Fox News first came on, they came on in 1996, was how loud the anchors talked. Like, I didn't understand much. I didn't understand anything about politics back then. But I always noticed, like, Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, Holmes and Kennedy. You know what's really interesting is if you ever watch Holmes and Hannity.
Oh, Hannity and
Holmes.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Holmes was very quiet spoken, and Hannity was very loud and used these big hand gestures. And Bill O'Reilly, when he brought people on, even though they were subject matter expert and brilliantly way smarter than him and schooled him with the actual data, he would appear to win because his voice was so loud and his size. And our limbic system kind of looks at that. It's like, okay, this person is bigger, they're louder, they beat their chest louder, they move their hands around more. That looks like a leader right there. And I am interpreting that as somebody who knows what they're doing. That's somebody I want to follow. Rather than the soft-spoken statistician over there. It's like, well, you got to look at it like this. It's our limbic system that's like, no, I want that loud guy who's big and broad shoulders.
It's funny. Like I'm 6'3", 220 pounds. I'm actually very loud, but I restrain myself during lives so other people get a chance to speak and I don't hog anything. But like I would love to debate those loud people because I'm all those things. I'm very loud. I'm very articulate with my hands, and I have no hesitation to denigrate someone for ignorance or BSing. And I have a lot of the statistical knowledge. Like, I would love to be able to do this in a more public manner, but I'm very afraid of losing my privacy.
Oh,
I have 3 kids, and like I already get a lot of hate, like DMs, of just
me
like,
too.
oh yeah, we have that in common. But it's so true. I feel like that's almost done on purpose in media. Like the actual expert is quiet and timid, and then there's just a loud idiot who seems to win the debate.
Yeah, it reminds me of going to a zoo and watching gorillas.
Did you
Typically,
see? Did you
typically
see
the
that
oh,
debate with? No, no problem. Did you see that debate with Destiny and then that January Sixer guy?
oh God, that was so terrible.
Yeah, but honestly, to a foolish person, that guy won and Destiny lost, even though Destiny destroyed everything he said with facts. But the fact that Destiny is considered to be like the a champion, like a visible champion of the left in the media, it's very discouraging. It is very discouraging because he doesn't project strength and confidence.
No, and it's just how he holds himself together. Sometimes it looks like he's been in gaming for like 3 days with no shower, and
It's a bad
yeah,
example. It's a
yeah,
poor
exactly,
example. Even though
exactly.
he's very intelligent, and I agree with a lot of his talking points, there has to be like a burly equivalent to that, and that is how we. If you actually put, I guess what's considered traditionally masculine on the screen, saying these facts confidently, you will get some people out of the incel community or even in the incel community to start supporting that because like weaker men gravitate towards more confident men. Just people in general, weaker personalities gravitate towards stronger personalities.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. It just matters if they're strong.
it seems to be a survival mechanism, and
Yes.
I like to read up on psychology quite a bit. And if you ever look at the amygdala,
Mhm.
typically people with an overactive amygdala, some folks with ADHD or high anxiety, um, typically we're always in fight or flight mode. But also people with paranoid personality disorder
Yeah.
are very impressionable by these folks because they're using a lot of fear, and it's like you have to ask yourself is what's most prone to be active in your brain when somebody's delivering you facts or a speech or something like that. And if we're not doing a good enough job with ourselves, like exercising our frontal lobes, where it's like
Yeah.
where logic and reason come from, and we're just consuming content all the time, well, we're going to be more easily impressionable
Sure.
based on how we've shaped the plasticity of our brain. And I like to leave this one note. Today, it seems like one of the problems that we have, all of us humans, is take for example, you're trying to get in shape and go to the gym. Well, imagine like you just drink protein shakes all the time, and you never do go to the gym. You're just consuming, but you never exercise. Well, the same goes for social media and for consuming news. If you're just consuming and you're never exercising or reflecting and trying to connect the dots and sit in
And
silence,
dialogue and having
yeah,
meaningful dialogue about the data you consume. Go ahead.
precisely, then you're molding the plasticity of your brain to work based more on emotions rather than logic.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. All right, so I gotta wrap up. I have to go to the gym, and then I have to have lunch and then pick up my kids. All right, Erica, this was great. Everybody, if you're not following Erica Parker, please, Erica Barker, sorry, please do so. And you're on YouTube, right? Give her a follow on YouTube, guys. I have 2 people viewing my YouTube right now. All right, you 2 people, the 2 of you, go follow Erica Barker, okay? All right, thank you so much. I'd love to have you on again, and we'll have a more data heavy conversation because this is a lot of fun. And I wanted to pick your brain, but like I got so into all of these other just like topics because like my attention could be like a fish that way. Like, oh, this is cool. Let's go there. I'll just keep a list with me.
And we'll have to talk about Mr. Beast sometime. I want to know what all that's about.
Absolutely, we definitely will, Erica. All right, thank you so much.
All right, Gia. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you, everybody.